Welcome into Vandy on SI. I'm Joey Dwyer here with Dylan Tovitz. Dylan, what a weekend for Vanderbilt football. Here to reflect on it for a little bit, but man, it's just almost surreal to see this program do these types of things. I wrote this morning. I don't know if I've ever seen a more gutsy team, and I'm sure there have been, but it's jarring to think about. I'm watching Vanderbilt run out of the tunnel at South Carolina. Diego Pavia goes in the huddle. I don't think he realized the camera was there, but it picked it up and he said, this is going to be easy, something along those lines. A couple minutes later, Bryce Coward comes out. He's doing spurs down at the student section. And then there, earlier in the week, Bryce Henderson goes and says, basically, I don't know if it was fully a guarantee, but almost guarantees a win on the record. And Dylan, in the past, those things would be trouble for Vanderbilt football. That puts a chip on the other team's shoulder, and that team goes and kicks Vanderbilt's butt, right? We've seen it time and time again. Not this time. Vanderbilt talked all types of stuff throughout the week, and it backed it up. I think that says something about it, Dylan.
Yeah, absolutely. And this team continues to, I think, prove everybody wrong and everybody externally, internally, they've had this belief since day one. I was talking to some people this week, and like for me, it was my first like real, fall camp around a team. So I didn't have anything to compare it to, but you could tell, I think, pretty quickly when you were there for longer than me, so you could attest to this, but you could tell pretty quickly when you arrived this summer that there was a different feel around this team. And like again, I had nothing to compare it to, so I thought maybe I was just being naive as a Vanderbilt student. But at the same time, like you're seeing this belief, and it's like, how far can this team really go? Is where my head's going because they've continued to, pull off upsets and prove everybody wrong at every turn so far. And like the belief inside that building and the goal inside that building is, to make the college football playoff and win a national championship. And suddenly, that seems, and of course, we're still in week three, but that seems like a lot more of a real possibility than it actually was going into this season. So it's kind of crazy to think about. And obviously, we're getting way ahead of ourselves, but I think this team's ceiling might be higher than we initially realized as, external media members at the very least.
For sure. And here's where I think that's tangible. They're ranked 20th in the AP poll. It's been since 2008 that they've been ranked that high. 2008 just keeps coming up at this point, Dylan. I mean, this is a this is a different year than I think even 2024 was. And talked about this with Graham a little bit on Saturday, but Vanderbilt goes and beats South Carolina, and Clark Lee goes in the press conference after and says he thinks what this team has what it takes to win all of its games.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we necessarily got that messaging last year. Maybe he told the team that or he believed that, but that felt more like a good team on good team, and Vanderbilt got the better of it rather than a stunning upset. And even ESPN, I was watching SportsCenter on Saturday night with Graham. They referred to it as an upset win, and I had to do a double take. Like, is that really an upset win? And it's crazy to think that Vanderbilt goes and beats the number 11 team in the country on the road. It really didn't feel like an upset though, and I think that's a testament to how far they've come as well, and really how far they can go. That you're watching all this play out, and maybe you're a little surprised at the margin, or you're surprised at how much South Carolina unravels down the stretch, which frankly I was. I thought they were better than unraveling when Lenore Sellers went out of the game. I thought they were going to make it a game still, but man, Dylan, I'm thinking that's not really an upset, and I think that's a huge deal for this program.
It's a good point because, the Virginia Tech win last year, the Alabama win last year, like those felt like upsets. They were high scoring games where like things weren't right for us at the end. Like these first, two games, South Carolina and Virginia Tech, like Blaze Brolowitz has been in the game in the fourth quarter of both of these matchups. We've outscored them, I believe, 51-0 in the last two second halves. And again, like you hear that kind of stat and you're like, okay, maybe we were playing, two FCS teams. Like they had just outscored Virginia Tech and South Carolina 51-0 in the last two second halves. And I know Virginia Tech unraveled against Old Dominion and Brent Pry got fired this week. But that says something to your point. How they're winning these games is just as important as the fact that they're winning them, in terms of kind of outlook for the future. And again, I'm not going out there and saying they're, front runners for the national championship or even necessarily contenders yet. But you do have to really start to ask yourself some questions about like when is this team going to go wrong? And the next 2 weeks are important because I think you don't want to get complacent, and we've seen what can happen in the past when you do get complacent, especially Georgia State. They beat us last year, so you don't want to get complacent. But assuming everything goes right, then you're all of a sudden 5-0 going into Tuscaloosa. Um, Looking to, win against Alabama again, and then you have your little bye week, and then you have LSU. So it's like there's a lot coming up for this team. Um, but I do think how they've won the last two games and in the margin they have and in the pure dominance that they have, frankly. And I think Virginia Tech, there were some questions about, okay, maybe this team just isn't very good, which we kind of saw this week. But South Carolina is a good football team. Like whether or not, I know Sellers got hurt and didn't end up playing, but South Carolina is not a pushover, and they didn't look all that great, but I think that's a credit to Vanderbilt, who kind of broke their will by halfway through the third quarter, which is usually what happens to Vanderbilt, if we're talking historically. But to see that, like, maybe you don't think South Carolina was a top 11 team in the nation, like they were ranked, but regardless, like, this is definitely, or it definitely was a top 25 team. And it's an SEC team, and it's a team that's really tough and really big, and Vanderbilt went out there and completely dismantled them, frankly.
For sure. And I want to hit on the Lenore Sellers point after a few days of reflection here. I think it certainly made a difference. And Graham and I talked about that on Saturday. F- First of all, I think it demoralized South Carolina in a way. And I think once it saw that it wasn't going to win this game and that Vanderbilt was too good to beat with a backup quarterback, I think things kind of unraveled for it.
Yeah.
Dylan, I also don't think that South Carolina wins that game with Lenore Sellers. As great as Lenore Sellers is, there's a whole row of NFL scouts behind us. I'm sure they're for Lenore Sellers, but I don't think that was the reason South Carolina lost the game. I think Vanderbilt executed really well. I thought Vanderbilt's offense in a lot of ways, I think impressed me, although I don't think it was their most dominant performance. Pavia was actually graded like a 51 by PFF, which Javier Pavia is a tough critic. I don't know that he would even go that low on the scale for Diego Pavia, but point being, I think its offense did enough, scored 31 points. Its defense was dominant. Even with Sellers in the game at times, I thought its defense looked really good. The Zane Wood interception, I thought really flipped things even before Patterson hit Sellers and went out of the game, both of them. But Dylan, I guess just broadly your thoughts on Sellers leaving the game and the impact of that. I think it obviously demoralized South Carolina, but I don't know that it was the determining factor in how this thing went.
Yeah, I would agree. I definitely think the game is closer with Sellers, but I mean, you have to realize that Vanderbilt's offense put up 31 points, and that was with its backups in the fourth quarter.
Hmm.
So in order to win this game, Sellers in that offense would have needed to score 5 touchdowns at least. Which if you saw how I think the game went at the first South Carolina drive was strong, but after that, like even with Sellers, their offense was not dominating in any way, shape, or form. And I think it was a good showing by the defense to your point. And I would absolutely agree that um, Lenore Sellers being in the game is not going to change the outcome. I think you wouldn't have seen Blaise Berlowitz, and it wouldn't have been as big of a deficit because it also was a little bit of a mental thing for South Carolina once they got down a score or two and knew they didn't have Sellers. But that's still a really good offense, and Sellers is great, but he has not necessarily been a complete like you know, game changer, like player who is going to take over and single-handedly take a team from putting up 7 points against Vanderbilt's defense to putting up 40 points. So I would agree that I don't necessarily see a path to them winning, even if Sellers stays. And it's hard to think hypothetically because you have no idea the snowball effect that had. Maybe Nick Harbor stopped. They had to change his route tree because um, the Gamecock backup didn't have arm strength like Sellers does. I mean, it kind of took away their whole quarterback running game a bit, which frankly Sellers ran a bit when he was in the game, but it wasn't that I thought they did a good job with that. It was something I was worried about going in after some shakiness against Kyron Jones and the Hokies the week before on the ground. Um, but I thought the defense played really well. I thought the corners were good. They worried me a little bit in the beginning. I thought Colby Taylor Martell Height were playing some soft coverage on Nick Harbor, and we kept finding those kind of holes in the middle of the field, which is good because he wasn't beating them completely down the field. But there was definitely some soft coverage there, but I think that got cleaned up by the second or third drive. I thought CJ Hurd had another fantastic game, and he's been under the. Someone asked me the other day, like, has he been their best defensive player? And I think there's certainly a case for it.
Mhm.
I think Nick Rinaldi's up there. I think maybe Miles Capers is up there, but I thought CJ Hurd played really well. And the truth is, we haven't seen the like top getting taken off this defense very much at all. Now that you think about it,
Mhm.
they're not getting beat on 60-yard post routes down the field or go routes, and I think that's a credit to the safeties. They've played a lot of zone, cover two, cover three, but the safeties aren't getting beat like at all. And I thought Marlon Sewell, we haven't said his name very much,
Mhm.
and I think that's usually a good sign. If you're in the secondary and you're not saying someone's name, it means he's playing well. So I thought overall the defense was played very strong, and I don't think having Sellers would have made a huge impact on the outcome, although it likely would have been closer.
Sure. Dylan, I wrote through some PFF stuff here. Brandon Fontenette was the highest graded player on the defense,
He had a
actually
good
far
game.
and away the highest graded player on the team with 86.9, graded an 87.8 in coverage. I mean, that's a big deal
Yeah,
as well. We really feel like we hadn't seen the Brandon Fontenette through the first two games, and now
agreed.
you really see him. CJ Hurd, to your point, ranked in 81.5. I think that's a big deal, and he's consistently been kind of at the top of those reports. I think yeah, I thought of him as more of a come down in the box and hit guy, but maybe his skill set is a little bit more versatile than that as well. He was graded an 84 in coverage. Bryce Callen was next with a 78, which I think if you're a Vanderbilt fan, you really like. He's flying around. He's
Great.
starting to make some plays a little bit. And obviously, you got to note Nick Rinaldi, who got the game ball, but honestly, I don't think it's super high in here. Let me see where Nick Rinaldi was ranked the 13th ranked Vanderbilt defensive player, but obviously it's something that Clark Lee liked to give him the game ball. But Dylan, I think here's a point about the defense that I think is a big deal relative to kind of what I've seen in past years. I just think they're flying around a little bit more. I think there's so many old guys that know what they're supposed to do, know where they're supposed to be, I really don't see a whole lot of miscommunication or guys letting things slide down the field 30 yards like we talked about all offseason about what happened against Virginia Tech at times last year. I think they're just really sound, and I think there's a lot of guys who are confident in their role. They know what they're supposed to do, they know where they're supposed to be. And I think that's really the benefit of having so much continuity and giving 78% of the defensive production back and a lot of the stars, Dylan. It's a group of guys that they all know what they're supposed to do, and I think you're seeing them play with some confidence. And now you're starting to see them be a little bit more disruptive. They really got to the quarterback on Saturday, and more than that, forced four turnovers, which first time since 2022 they did that. All that's a big deal, Dylan.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the defense is starting to click like you saw and build off of each other. And I think we have to mention Steve Gregory because I think he called a fantastic
Mhm.
game. I think it was I tweeted this out after, but like out of all the things that stood out to me, like the coaching, I thought Vanderbilt Shane Beamer in South Carolina. Shane Beamer's a very good coach. South Carolina has a very good coaching staff. I thought Clark Lee and his staff completely outcoached them the entire game.
Mhm.
And that showed, and I think that's really impressive. Um, but I think we have to realize that this defense does look more cohesive. They look like, a unit that's playing together and is playing like a real, even professional level defensive unit. And I think maybe a lot of that has to do with Gregory. Clark Lee has been leading the defense since he's been here, and he's also been trying to do head coach duties. And I don't know how much of an impact that had, but I think having Steve Gregory appointed as defensive coordinator, a guy who, wore the green dot for the New England Patriots under Bill Belichick and Matt Patricia and clearly knows what he's doing. And Clark spoke a little bit about him on Thursday, praising him obviously for the job he's done so far. But I thought he called a really good game. You mentioned the Zaylen Wood interception. That was a play where that was all Steve Gregory. I mean, Wood had to make the play, but he ended up dropping Wood, who was lined up as like the nose tackle. He brought, I think, CJ Hurd and maybe another corner on the blitz. And Sellers just didn't see Wood dropping into coverage at all because you wouldn't expect a Zaylen Wood to be dropping into coverage. So it's plays like that, it's designs like that that I think really show Gregory's creativity. But to your point, there does appear to be a lot more cohesiveness in that defensive unit. from, the secondary all the way up to the front four. And yeah, I'd say, Nick Rinaldi, I thought had a good game. He ended up with the game ball. I think PFF grades are great sometimes, but they're kind of hard to
Yeah, right.
explain in others. I definitely think it's a very flawed metric, which is, I think, pretty universally accepted. But I mean, it does tell you some things, but I think, you mentioned Pavio's graded a 51. I thought outside of the um, pick, he played a really good game. So, but yeah, really, really good to see that from Rinaldi. I think he's coming into his own, like very well, especially as a run defender. Um, like really strong game from him defending the run. And that's always been his, he's always been able to rush the passer on third downs, passing downs. So I think being able to do that, it's going to be hard to keep him off the field. I thought Bryce Cowan. I mean, we expected this from Bryce Cowan since training camp. He's really athletic. He was flying around the field. He mentioned before the season started that he might play on the edge a bit. I actually saw him line up on the edge a couple times. So really good game from him. And yeah, I'd say it really the defensive unit is starting to click, and they're going to need it because you can have a star quarterback and you can have the best tight end in the country and offense that's clicking, but if you don't have a defense that can stop the LSUs and the Bamas of the world and even at least get some stops against them to give your offense a shot, you're not going to have a shot to win those games. So I think it's really important going forward.
For sure. And Dylan, I think they're heading into the year, there was a little hesitancy from those who kind of knew the program about Steve Gregory's ability to call games effectively and
Yeah.
kind of what Vanderbilt did while he called games in the second half of the season. And even there's rumors that he maybe had a hand in that Georgia State game last year, which I think was more about preparation than the calls either way. So I think it's a positive sign for Vanderbilt that guys seem to be believing in the calls and guys seem to be invested in Steve Gregory and are maybe backing him a little bit more than I think initially thought at this point of the season. I think that's a big deal for them. Tim Beck too, I think deserves some credit, like you kind of mentioned in your tweet and things along those lines. The second play of the game, I think was a big deal where we had talked all week about they needed an Eli Stowers game, and it wasn't Eli Stowers' number one game of his Vanderbilt career, but they were very clearly intentional about putting a wrinkle in the offense to get Eli Stowers involved. I thought that was a big deal. I thought the running game maybe it wasn't a genius scheme, but I think it was more effective than I thought it would be against that South Carolina front seven, and I think that's a big deal that I attribute partly to Tim Beck as well. So I think Tim Beck deserves some credit on top of Steve Gregory there too. My point being,
Yeah, I agree completely. I think Beck called a really good game. I think the offensive line, it started with them. I think he was able to kind of call like a lot more because they were doing their job, especially in the run blocking. I've been consistently impressed with the run blocking, probably more than the
Mhm.
pass blocking so far. I think like you've seen it with Cedric and MK Young and James Lassiter, who's now like a guy
Mhm.
we can actually talk about. But I think the holes that they're creating has been great, and a lot of that is due to their ability, especially the interior offensive line. I think Jordan White's playing like one of, if not the best center in the country.
Yeah,
And it's sometimes hard to tell when a center is dominating the game. But if you watch Jordan White, you could tell pretty easily that he's dominating the game, which is kind of cool. But yeah, I think you always have to give some of the run game credit to Tim Beck because every run. Um, every play that they run is not like they don't just like hand the ball up the middle and run a simple, HB dive
hmm
formation. Like every play is there's some, uniqueness about it with Tim Beck and he's pulling his guards to, create a trap play or he's pitching something out or it's a zone read. And I think, you know, the fact that they do that so much and the threat of that has made their entire offense better because they're so multidimensional. I mean, there was a play I think in the first quarter, I think it ends up being a pass play. I want to say play action, but they ran the like Caleb Barnett like fake jet
hmm
sweep, and they
that was
didn't
the
give.
Stowers split. Yeah.
Oh yes, yes, that was the Stowers screen. I thought that was great. I mean, they ran the
Mm-hmm.
fake Caleb Barnett jet sweep, and then ended up throwing a screen pass to Stowers to that same side. I mean,
hmm
like I think that right there is like the definition of Tim Beck's offense. And a lot of it, you could call it eye candy or you could call it, a lot of pre-snap movement, which they've actually been doing less than they did last year. And that was something Clark
hmm
said going into the season that, with the new NCAA rules and they're going to keep things a little
hmm
simpler. But they've been doing a lot with, pulling the ball and running, and it shows in the run game. And I think the other thing that I think we have to mention, and I'm sure you have some thoughts on this, but where this is different for me than last year and years past is that's not the only thing they can do. Like there was a play in
Right.
the first quarter, it was third and like 20 or something, and
Mhm.
they didn't do anything crazy. Like they didn't do any funky trick play. Like they dropped Pavia back there, and the offensive line like pass blocked for him on third and long, and he like threw the ball 25 yards over the middle of the field on a dig and got a first down. Like
Mhm.
that's something that we haven't seen, and that's something that, the best offenses in the country can do. And I thought Pavia did it on Saturday, and he's done it so far this season. And I think a lot of that is the fact that he has more confidence in his arm than he ever has, because that's not an easy throw to make, and it's a throw that if you don't have the strength will get jumped. I think it's
Mhm.
confidence in his offensive line and his tackles to be able to block and not get hit in the blind side the second he tries to release a ball if he's just sitting in the pocket. He just looks more comfortable out there, and that's a testament to not just him, but the entire offense. And the receivers getting open too.
For sure, Dylan. I think that's a big deal, and I think that is what makes this thing more sustainable than it has been in the past. They're more explosive for sure. We talked about that last week, but again, I think it's just Diego Pavia having a lot more trust in what's around him. I think the offensive line is markedly better than it was last year. Jordan White's a huge difference maker. I think the tackles are just more fit in the SEC body wise, and I think a little bit more agile than maybe what they've had in the past. Dylan, I think the receivers, though, that's a big difference. Trey Richardson has been talked about a ton, and Eli Stowers been talked about a ton, but I just think they have a lot more explosive ability. They have a lot more guys that can get open down the field. And I think that's a huge difference for them. Like you said, the third down I thought was a real play where in the past they weren't designed to be able to do anything when they were behind the sticks on third down. They get two penalties on the same play, I think, and they somehow get out of it. And obviously, it's nullified by Stout or Pavia throwing the interception in the end zone. But even then, they're able to be a little more resilient to that. And their run game's been more explosive too, which I think is a big deal, especially against Virginia Tech, as they kind of wore Virginia Tech down. Dylan, though, the big point here that I think you make, and um, now I'm kind of piggybacking off of here, this is a lot more sustainable than it has been because it doesn't have to be let's put together a 9 minute drive and take the soul out of the other team and hope that you get a stop after that. It's we don't have to be in third and two if we're going to get a conversion here. That's what Clark Lee's thinking. And I don't know that he's ever had the luxury to think that before. He's got guys who can get open. He's got an offensive line that can protect a little bit better. That's a big deal, Dylan. And I think that really shows you how far this offense has come. We were skeptical about the wide receiver room. I think we were wrong about being skeptical of it. And Dylan, it's crazy. Trent Hudson really hasn't even given them anything, and Martel Height really hasn't given them much either. And they're still really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely right. And Joey, I think you nailed it because being able to have confidence in your offense to consistently convert a third and seven completely changes how you call an entire game if you're Tim
Mhm.
Beck and Clark Lee and Jerry Kill, because you can afford to take those shots on first down now and call the game a little more aggressively and still have confidence that you don't need to necessarily stay completely ahead of the sticks the whole time. But and a lot of that is because of the receivers. I thought we've talked about Trey Richardson and how he's been great in the short game and how he's made a couple of those acrobatic catches. But what stood out to me the most is his route running, actually. I think
Mhm.
he's like done a really, really good job of just getting open, like in the middle of the field, which is not that easy to do. Frankly, I think the route running has been great in general. Junior Sherrill on his he ran like a disgusting whip route, I think,
Mhm.
in the end zone um, on Saturday. And I think a lot of that, I mean, Richie Hoskins is a great route runner. He showed up a bit on Saturday, played more than we've seen him, I think.
Mhm.
Um, he's also a great, blocker in the run game, which helps. Same with Cole Spence, who
Mhm.
hasn't, I think, seen the field as much. He certainly hasn't been as big of an impact in the passing game, but he always makes his impact. Throwing blocks, and that's another thing that helps with the run game. But yeah, I mean, it's huge to be able to have an offense and that can do that. And you saw it a little bit last year. You think about the Alabama game and you think about the 4th and 1 to Junior Sherrill. Like to me, that play was much more of an anomaly. And of
Yeah,
course it was
right.
4th and 1, but pretend it wasn't 4th and 1. Like I think we my jaw like visibly dropped when I saw that, and it wasn't just because it was 4th and 1. It was like Vanderbilt isn't supposed to do that. Like, why didn't we run a zone
Mhm.
read and try to break Pavia? And that's element of the offense is still there to your point, but I think consistently, if we're talking like the places that Vanderbilt wants to go, they're going to need this offense that can convert on a 3rd and 12 and can create these big chunk plays. And that's what it is. And Clark Lee's talked about it, how like they want to build on these explosives and they need explosive plays. And I don't think we've necessarily seen that many explosive plays so far. It's not that like Pavi is just chucking the ball down the field. Although he is more, but I mean, there was the touchdown to Bryson Coleman against Virginia Tech, and there have been a
Mhm.
couple, but you've seen the like signs of it and you've seen that the capabilities that Pavia has, the capabilities that the offensive line has to give him time to be able to throw that ball down the field. And obviously, you've seen the receivers been able to go up and make plays. And I think we're going to see that continue to evolve. I think Martel Hyde had a well career high, but 4 receptions in the game, so he's definitely getting there on the offensive side. I think it's been a transition for sure, but they're throwing him out there more each and every game.
Mhm.
And I
He
actually,
played more offensive snaps than defensive snaps.
yeah, and a lot of that also is the fact that the corners ended up, holding their own pretty well. I mean, Colby Taylor played,
Mhm.
I think, almost the whole game, but we saw Mark Davis in there, we saw Jordan Matthews in there, Marlon Jones, I even think played a little, but
Mhm.
so that's a testament to the cornerbacks. But I thought, I actually asked Clark this week about Martell because he confirmed that he spoke to Jaguars head coach Liam Cowan about Travis Hunter and his role on the Jaguars, and he also said that Jerry Kill spoke to Deion Sanders about it at Colorado, and this was reported in an ESPN article. But Clark said that he spoke to Cowan and really kind of talked to him about what that role looks like at the next level. If it's something Martell wants to seriously, consider. And I don't think he didn't tell me the exact result of the conversation, but he did say that he thinks Martell is doing more on the offensive side of the ball than even he necessarily envisioned at first. So I do think we're going to see that continue to evolve. And he's been a pretty good route runner too. Um, so definitely think the offense in general is clicking a lot better. And to your point, Joey, there are signs of this future sustainability that maybe hasn't been there in years past, even when the offense has performed like this.
You mentioned that 4th and 1 play against Alabama, and I think that's really where it hits home for me. To get that conversion, Pavia had to be a superhero there, and Junior Sherrill did too.
Yeah,
That's not the case anymore with
great.
this offense, and I think that's the biggest difference. Where, first of all, Pavia's graded as a 51, I don't think would be accurate. He's 18 for 25, 177 yards, 2 touchdowns. The
Yeah.
interception was bad, but I don't think a 51 is fair for that performance. And even his harshest critic, his brother, would tell you that was probably not accurate. The thing that I saw though was Diego Pavia in certain games, and he's still going to have moments where he's going to have to do a lot. In certain games, kind of like the last two, he's had the freedom to manage the game a little bit and kind of sit back there and make a throw. And it doesn't have to be like Kentucky last year where he's running all over the place and 10 seconds into the play, he's finding a guy in the end zone who has been running around for 8 seconds past the 10-yard line. I mean, that's what I look at and say this is a little bit different where they're operating more like an SEC offense rather than let's put it all on Pavia's back and let him do his thing and hope that that gets us to the promised land. What happens if Pavia gets hurt like he did last year and is banged up down the stretch and he can't be a superhero? He doesn't have to be anymore, Dylan. And I think that's probably the biggest step I've seen from their offense.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point there that being able to do that also protects Pavia a lot more. I think,
Mm-hmm.
and Clark has spoken about this. He won't slide ever, and he's still going out there and throwing lead blocks on a jet sweep, which is ridiculous, but like also kind of awesome if you're a Vanderbilt fan. Um, like I'm sure like they don't love that, but like at the same time, like that's just who he is. So if you give him an opportunity to go out there and try to block a linebacker or to like lower his shoulder and try to get an extra 3 yards, he's gonna do it. But I thought actually against South Carolina, he didn't have to do it that much. Like they weren't running him as much because they were able to have this completely functional offense without him pulling the ball and putting his head down. And he ran a good bit, but it wasn't there was noticeably a lot less this game where I was like, get down, like don't take a hit, like why are you taking a
Mm-hmm.
hit than there was even against Virginia Tech and frankly Charleston Southern as well. So it also helps with the longevity because Blaze Brelowitz has been solid when he's been in the game, but you do have to, realize that protecting Pavia and going forward, like that's got to be your number one goal. So Clark has said he's like trying to put him in positions where he doesn't have the opportunity to lower his head and take a hit. I mean, he when he blocked this South Carolina defender, he like blocked him with his helmet. I was like,
Yeah,
just
that
like
was
yeah,
somebody joked that it was targeting on
yeah, so,
Twitter.
like he kind of went flying. So it was like I don't think there's enough but like he did lower his helmet. Like frankly, if that was a bigger guy and a smaller guy, like it could have been targeting. I don't
Mhm.
think they would ever call it in that setting, but it's true, and I think you do have to protect him for sure. But it was a strong game. I thought quick Brock Taylor mentioned because I thought he
Yeah,
had
that
a
was a big kick.
big kick and yeah, so that was big time. And he's been nails so far this year. Obviously, hasn't had that many big kicks to make or big opportunities. But he continues to show that he's one of the better kickers in the SEC.
Sure. Dylan, before we get out of here, I think it's important. Another quick State of the Union here. This is jarring. Vanderbilt ranked 20th in the AP poll, first time since 2008. That's not really what's drawing to me. It's looking at who's right behind Vanderbilt. 21 is Michigan, 22 is Auburn, 23 is Mizzou, 24 is Notre Dame, 25 is USC, South Carolina is right outside the top 25. Clemson is behind Vanderbilt. It's just what a crazy time we're living in, Dylan.
It's crazy. And, I saw a stat this week that this is the earliest in a season that Vanderbilt's been ranked since 1958. So, like, think about it. It's the week 4A people. I think in 2008, they were ranked in week 5, I want to say. But before
Mhm.
that, 1958, they were ranked 20th in the week 3A people. So this is the earliest in like literally 70 years, over 70 years that they've been, or not 70 years, 65, 8 years, whatever it is, that they've been, ranked this early in the season.
Mhm.
So that's just like another quick, nugget. But it's true. And I think you look at the teams that are around Vanderbilt and, they're ranked 20th in the AP poll, assuming nothing disastrous happens against Georgia State and Utah State. That's only going to go up
Mhm.
entering Alabama. Um, I've been hearing murmurs from students about college game day, perhaps for the LSU game. I think that'll depend on what
You
happens.
one of those students that is murmuring?
Maybe I might be, actually college, one of our parallel SI sites predicted it, LSU Vanderbilt. Did you see this?
Really?
Yeah,
No, I
this was
didn't see
last
this.
week before they put out an article every week. It's like college football and SI, and before Vanderbilt just won, they predicted that would be. I don't think there's like a clear other game that week, but that would be, I think, pretty telling about how far this program's come as well. I believe it's the first time since maybe 2008 that they've had game day here. That might be wrong. Don't take my word for that.
A
But
long time ago. I would have known the stat last year, but
long
it's too early for me to even think about it, but it shouldn't be because of what they've done. Dylan, what a week for Vanderbilt football, and finally a non-road trip week where Vanderbilt gets to come home and play Georgia State. And again, we'll talk about Georgia State throughout the week, kind of telling the difference in the magnitude of South Carolina and Georgia State, where we haven't even mentioned Georgia State really yet. But I think a revenge game, kind of in order here for Vanderbilt. I don't expect Vanderbilt to come out here and drop this game, but we'll talk about that throughout the week. Probably, maybe we'll do something on Thursday again. It seemed like that did decently well for relative to what we expected, so we'll do that again. But thank you guys for watching. On behalf of Dylan Tovitz, I'm Joey Dwyer. We'll talk to you soon, probably Thursday. Peace.